Welcome to Waiting on the Trade, a monthly comics book club for people who can't keep up with monthly comics. I'm Matt Ledger.
I'm Patrick Fitzgerald Fleck.
This month we're talking about Sandman, Endless Nights, the first coda to Neil Gaiman's Sandman saga. In case you need a refresher about this book, Pat.
I do.
Endless Nights is a set of 7 stories featuring the Endless, each illustrated by a different artist or artists. Some are good, some are not as good, and we're going to figure out which ones are good and which ones are not as good.
I did tempt you with the allure of a power ranking. This is true.
I have the power ranking assembled, Pat.
I knew you would. I knew I could not stay away.
It was pretty easy to rattle off, actually. There's like 2 stories to me that flip back and forth in my ranking. Because one, I like the story better, and one, I like the art better. But other than that, like, I set down my initial power ranking when I started doing my notes, and it did not change.
Nice.
And the one that I have worst is not the one that I couldn't finish.
Oh, really? I was wondering about that. Because
No.
I'm going to tell you right now, that's not my least favorite.
Okay.
In fact, it's rather high on my list.
So how do you want to do this? Do you want to do it in book order? Do you want to do it in power ranking order?
Well, sure, but let's give, a little background. Like, you forget how we do this podcast, man. Let me give a little background on how we got to this comic book originally.
I was going to let you do that, Pat.
Were you?
I was.
I thought you were going to steam right ahead to your power ranking. But
You got me excited.
I know. It's the desire of power ranking. It's
what was I? Oh, I was power ranking the Friends from Friends the other night, and Kat made me stop.
What the hell? You've got a problem.
I know. Well, I mean, okay, digression.
Chandler
is number 1?
Number 1.
Chandler or Monica, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, one of the two of them, which is why we finally made it to the part where Chandler and Monica are together, and I think Friends is, like, hitting its stride now in season 5. Yeah, Pat, tell me a little bit about this book and why you chose it. Because you're a big Sandman fan.
I am.
A Sandman stan?
Neil Gaiman gets me. He's the kind of like a surrealist that I can get into. And like his fantasy just really trips my triggers, as you would say. I think we got into it probably my freshman year of college. You and Mike, I think, had already dipped your toes in, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that sounds right. I'm trying to think of when I would have first read like any Sandman, because I know when I like went through it start to finish, I think was actually when we were in Australia.
Well, I know some of the early conventions that we went to, I enjoyed like hunting down the trades to try to collect them all.
I was gonna say, I'm trying to figure out when Mike also got into it, because I feel like it was different. Like it was different times, which doesn't make any sense to me, given like the fact that
I don't know who started our fixation, but we certainly did grab a hold of it.
But I know, I'm pretty sure Sandman might have even been one they had at the library in Elkhorn, potentially.
Oh, yeah, that's totally possible.
Because the Elkhorn Library had Batman, Hellboy, and some Vertigo stuff. And that's what the Elkhorn Library had.
Good old Elkhorn Library.
Oh, and a subscription to Uncanny X-Men, depending on the year.
They had some ancient, like, I don't know, 2nd edition D&D books, too, because I totally checked those out.
Yeah, you getting into it your freshman year of college makes sense to me, because that is roughly at least when Mike and I got into it, though I'm not sure we got into it at the same time.
Sure. When the inciting incident occurred, we don't know. But
they might be separate inciting incidents is the thing that's like...
It's possible. I don't think it was in high school. I think it was post high school. So
yeah, I know. I'm pretty sure I have... Oh, I should have checked actually before I bought it on Comixology. I'm pretty sure I have all of Sandman that was totally legally acquired on a DVD somewhere that I got in Australia. And I probably should have looked at it before I bought it on Comixology, but it's also probably not bad to support the artist. So
I distinctly have memories of reading the trades, leaning against a tree behind Sutherland, being the giant nerd that I was.
Yeah, and those were definitely Mike's, which he lost and then found and then may have lost again.
Oh my god. Oh, good times. But yeah, Sandman is probably still my favorite comic book series. Like, it encompasses such a large like swath of storytelling not to be infatuated with Sandman? Do you not concur?
I concur. I'm just
Okay,
letting you
cool.
go on. I'm
Sure.
letting you vamp.
I don't know. I mean, Neil Gaiman, his characters are always so interesting. Like they always have such wonderful flaws to them that make them so human, especially when they aren't human.
Yeah, the whole thing, like, the thing about Sandman to me is, like, the fact that it despite it probably not being planned out as a complete unit of story, right? Because like, that's not really how monthly comic books work.
Right.
Like, it hangs like, the first issue, the second issue has Martian Manhunter in it, like,
Yeah, the weird like DC heroes that peppered into it was great. They
which
drop off towards the end, but
well, it pops up again in this one, we'll talk about it, right? Like,
oh, that's still my favorite. Yes, we'll
the
get
dream
there.
chapter in this one's full of so much DC Comics bullshit.
I loved it though.
Oh, it's great. It's probably my second favorite.
No, did you have the introduction by Gaiman in your digital
Yeah, so
edition? Okay.
mine you have the one that, like, it's, like, gold embossed on the front, and it's got, like, a comedy tragedy mask looking thing on it, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So the one I got is, like, the 30th anniversary edition one, so it
Ooh,
actually says it's volume 11 of Sandman here, which is not how it was
interesting.
originally published,
No.
and it's got, I think, a new Dave McKean cover, and it's, like,
Oh,
also has masks on it, but, like, it's not even close to the same, like, it's mostly pink. So,
pink. Interesting.
yeah, I'll send you I might be able to even just take a quick screenshot of it for you
Sure.
and drop it in the old
But yeah, in the
Discord chat.
introduction, Gaiman talks about the fact that this book took up what 9 years of his life,
Yep.
which is crazy. Like the amount of he said what over 2,000 pages, I believe is what he was saying. It's just a crazy amount of work that went into this.
I mean, it's 60 issues of comic books, right?
I
So that's
have seen this
at
cover. I don't like that cover.
yeah, the 30th anniversary edition covers are not my
That's all
fave.
of them, right? Like all the other trades of similar
Yeah, they're
style.
close to that.
Not a fan. Just
Yeah.
gonna say it. And pink is an interesting choice.
Yeah, I much prefer the cover you have. It's much simpler and, like, sort of gets at the thing without being too busy, but
And it's a fun, like slightly oversized trade too. So
yeah, which I think is we'll talk about it, like, the fact that you say it's oversized is interesting to me because digitally mine is, like, undersized and very key spots where I think it makes it kind of unreadable even.
I think it's slightly taller than a normal trade, but yeah.
I would believe it, and that totally makes a ton of sense to me because I blew it up on my main computer monitor before we started. I was
Mhm.
looking at specifically the two-page spread in Delirium that I could not get through. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, this totally makes sense, and I can read it on this monitor." I could not do it on the Chromebook.
That yeah, no, that would make sense. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, Neil Gaiman, Sandman. Probably it's the cornerstone of my comic book graphic novel like mind is Sandman. And then from Sandman I went to V for Vendetta and then from V for Vendetta go to Watchmen and like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so you're, like a Vertigo into comics guy, whereas I'm a superheroes into comics guy.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, I started with the Crow, so
Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
I guess so one of the things we've talked about a lot recently is, like, the world building inherent in a lot of
Yes.
especially fantasy comics,
Mhm.
and I guess this one isn't a great one to judge it off of for Sandman, but, like, how did you if you remember, how did you find, like, the world building of, like, that first volume of Sandman, and how did you find it, I guess, coming back to this volume again too, right? Because one of the things for me that I was thinking about is I don't think I would have anyone read this unless they'd already read Sandman. I'm wondering if you feel similarly.
It's one of the questions I wrote down is do you think this is a good intro for someone wanting to start reading Sandman?
I don't, but I also think there's a way to fix it. But you go first.
I think you could. I don't think you'll enjoy this. I think it would be interesting to read this first, read all of Sandman, and then read this
And
again.
then read it again. That is maybe a thing you could do, yeah.
Because I think you would enjoy the stories and it would give you insights into each of the endless that you wouldn't have otherwise and maybe would help. Because I do remember feeling a little bit lost in that first volume of Sandman because Gaiman just drops you into his world and it's a crazy. Like judging from this book, he likes his surreal art and panel layout, and he goes a little bit crazy with it in the first volume of Sandman. So maybe having this as like a touchstone would help
I don't know, man.
readers.
I think if you gave this to someone before you told them to read Sandman and they got to that despair story, they would not read Sandman.
I mean, that is such a. We'll get there, but that is such a good like representation of what despair is, though. Come on.
I, I'm gonna have this argument with you later.
Okay. Fast forward about 20 minutes, listeners, and we'll get there. But yeah, I mean, yeah, world building. I think if I just like we just read the first Gesh volume and what other ones we had issues with.
Fables for sure, which is in
Yes,
Vertigo too.
Fables. Yes. I would assume that if I hadn't read any Sandman and you gave me the first volume, I think I would probably have the same complaints. I think Gaiman's real good at setting up his worlds, though. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, the reason I was wondering about it, I honestly haven't read that first volume of Sandman in so long that I don't have a good opinion on it. I meant to try to like go backtrack and do that, but at the same time I was like, we're not discussing that, so is it a good use of my time?
Right.
And I actually have a physical copy of Sandman Overture, and I ended up reading that instead, basically.
What do I know what that is? I don't know.
It's the second coda of the many codas. It's the when did that come out? The 25th anniversary is when it started coming out.
Is that the one you bought me a issue?
Yeah,
of?
the first issue of. Yep.
It's a beautiful cover. I don't remember what's inside of it, but the cover.
I mean, it finally finished like 3 years later or something like that.
Fantastic.
So,
fantastic.
it's good. I mean, at least the first couple issues were good. I reread them today because I was going to reread that Delirium story to try and make sense of it. And I was like, I wonder if Overture's good.
That's Daniel as
Daniel's
spoilers.
in it, but it's mostly a prequel actually to the first.
Oh, cool. No, now that you say that, I do remember that. Yeah, because the cover is Dream with his helm, right?
Yeah,
That
battle
weird,
helm.
that weird helmet.
Yeah. So
okay.
backing up, I don't know that I'm qualified to judge that first volume of Sandman as like did it pull me in, but I feel like it did because I read all of Sandman.
Well, it's got the weird stuff with Cain and Abel, and like the weird like dream characters. I'm trying to remember if the Scarecrow dude is in there to begin with, but it's a little weird. But I think it gets you towards the end because it establishes the problem, Dream being captured and all that.
I mean, you also get multiple stories in that first volume of Sandman, right? Like he's out of his imprisonment by the end of. Is it the end of the first issue?
It might be. I don't
So like
know.
it goes quick as far as
Yeah.
setting stuff up. Like that first volume of Fables is one story in 6 issues, right? And that first volume of Sandman is at least 3 or 4 that I can think of.
Yeah.
And like you kind of get the same thing here, right? Where this is one graphic novel and it's 7 stories, and I think that works to varying degrees throughout it too. So like I think part of what
there are
maybe
8 issues in Preludes and Nocturnes.
Oh, dang. So that's at least I'm trying to remember what stories are in there, but it's not really here nor there because we're not talking about that.
Right.
But I think Neil Gaiman works really quickly and really well at building the worlds that he builds. So I'm not surprised that you as a comics reader encountering Sandman were drawn in, whereas encountering other stories that are like at least in a similar space. Like if someone was recommending comics to someone, I wouldn't be surprised if they were like, you should read Sandman and Fables and blah blah blah. And like I don't know that the level of quality and also the level of like being able to draw a reader in is the same between those sorts of series, I guess.
Yeah, I mean I would assume that Gaiman's ability for world building is from like he's a novelist, like he comes from a written medium that he then brought to comic books and not the other way around.
Yeah, but sometimes that actually works against you depending on who you are. Like there are a lot of novelists who come into comics and they're very verbose because they don't trust the art to do the storytelling.
Oh yeah, I can see that. Well, I mean, Gaiman has such a wonderful relationship with his illustrators.
Oh, absolutely. And like
you can really tell.
I actually got to do or like watch some of his masterclass stuff because I had a free masterclass subscription for work for a while. And he lays out kind of like how he like thumbnail, like thinks about scripting a comic, and like one of the first things he'll do is thumbnail it in his journal, like, and so he's thinking about the visuals, right, and like how the storytelling is actually going to go, and like
Mhm.
the thumbnail he puts out is just a guide for the artist. The artist can do whatever they want because that's how comics work. But the fact that he thinks in that visual way while writing the comic kind of, I think, carries through in that series. I think specifically the one he was showing thumbnails from where the Midsummer Night's Dream issue of Sandman,
Oh, yeah.
which is a really good issue of Sandman.
That is pretty good.
But yeah, so I think as far as a person who thinks about comics, I mean, like, the as much as I'm gonna like be really down on the despair story, like, that's a person who's experimenting with what comics are. So
I mean, yeah, it's pretty low on my list too, power ranking them. But I mean, I appreciate the fact that he's got the guts enough to just do something like this in comic books. It's
I mean,
crazy. You
definitely
don't
went
see
for it.
Yeah, it's just like, what is this? This is I'm looking at art pieces and not so much comic books at this point.
Yeah, I think we're gonna talk about whether that even is actually a comic. I mean, but
Yeah, no, I mean, he went for it.
how did you feel rereading this one, divorced from having read Sandman recently? Unless you went back and binged all of Sandman in the last month and didn't tell me.
I did not. I thought, I mean, I enjoyed it, obviously, but like just remembering the connections between the characters that they bring up, like I had forgotten that Desire and Despair are twins, and that came to me while reading this, and like
Ah,
the
see, I didn't
fact.
even remember that. Like, I feel like reading it, I didn't need any more context, but I knew I was missing it, if that makes sense.
Oh, really?
Yeah, here and there. Like,
Well, I knew that. Oh my god, so many D names. I knew that Dream and Desire were hated each other in Sandman proper, and this one I thought it was interesting that the Dream issue starts with Dream calling Desire his favorite sibling, and
which is
that
pretty good,
obviously
right?
shifts towards the end of it. But like, yeah, like especially that one in particular, like that's your favorite one, right?
That's my second favorite, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, we'll get there. But that one, like the fact that it takes place hundreds of millions of years before Sandman, and you get to see the Endless as they were back then, is fun. The fact that like Delirium is delight and not delirium at that point.
Yeah. I have like a love-hate relationship with stories that are built basically to like fill in holes in existing stories. Like, I both really like them when they work and I really hate them when they're over the top and gratuitous. And I really liked the Dream one. So
I mean, yeah, I don't think they were filling any holes because I think everything that was revealed in that had been like during Sandman proper. We
yeah,
were
I guess I
told that
didn't mean
delirium
filling.
was delight.
Yeah, not like filling holes so much as showing you like, oh hey, that thing that happened, this is how that happened, that sort of thing.
Mhm. Right, for
Like, there's
sure.
definitely an over the top with that where like there's a scene in Scott Snyder's Batman where he reveals the secret origin of Jim Gordon's trench coat. It's like, I
Oh,
don't.
damn.
It's just a coat, man.
But yeah, there are a couple stories in here that I do think you having read Sandman would help, would give you some basis to like I'm saying the delirium one you should probably have read Sandman to understand what's going on.
Yeah, the delirium when I read Sandman. I mean, okay, actually, I did understand what was going on. I
Okay.
couldn't. I literally physically couldn't read it. I feel like
Yeah,
at this point we need to start going through the probably story
sure.
by story.
Yes. And let's go back to your original question. How do you want to do this? Do we do power ranking or do we just go through them and then give our rankings of them
I
as we go
think I
through
want to
them?
do them in your power ranking order because that's most interesting to me.
Well, okay.
Do you want to start at the bottom or start at the top?
I guess we start at the bottom so we don't end
And on a good
with
note, that sounds correct to me. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So my first last one. My last
I guess
first one.
before we start too, I think there is
Sure.
something of merit in all the stories. It's not a case where we're just
None
gonna
of these
like.
are bad stories, no.
Well, I mean, there's the.
Okay. None of these are bad experiences. I do think they're worth experiencing.
I'll give you that.
Whether you bother to go read every single word that's in the despair one, or if you just, appreciate the disturbing imagery that he's shown you. Either way, it's fine.
Yeah, agreed.
But yeah, so my lowest power ranked story was the Destruction story,
Ooh, okay.
which I will tell you the name of.
Not if I beat you to it.
On the Peninsula. Art by Glenn Fabry. And the art is fine. I have nothing against the art, but the
Yeah.
story, like, it's. First off, Destruction is not. I never really could get a read on that guy.
Oh,
Like,
really? I really like Destruction.
really? Fair
Yeah,
enough.
maybe that's why it's much higher on my ranking than
Is it?
last.
Where
Yeah.
is it for you?
It's third or fourth, depending on if I like Death more than it.
Really
Yeah.
interesting. I mean, it's it is a good story. It's an okay. I mean, it's an okay story. It feels too short to me.
I agree with you actually about all of that.
And what Destruction does in it is very minimal. It's an interesting. The premise of it is this woman gets called to help excavate a hill of debris on a peninsula that seems to contain future objects from the future. And she encounters both destruction and delirium while she's out there, and sort of has a thing for destruction. He's so
Which why wouldn't
manly.
you? Look at the man.
Look at him. But that's basically it, right? Like she like flirts with the idea of how attracted she is to this person, uh, and then what was the? I'm trying to remember why she leaves.
The government comes and said they're going to take everything.
Yeah, that's right, because she discovers like weapons, future weapons that.
Yeah, first they find an iPhone.
Yeah, like a little telephone or something,
Yeah.
and then newspapers, and then she finds like a hunter seeker. Is that what he
Oh,
calls
right.
them?
First, actually, they find those pennies from a year ago, which
2019.
was the far future.
A year that hasn't happened yet. Oh,
far
if only we
future
could
of.
stay there in
I was
2019.
gonna say I'll go back.
Yeah, right. But yeah, and then they find weapons, and of course the government's going to come down and take control of that because there's weapons there, and we don't want that to fall in the wrong hands.
Yeah, and instead of the government actually getting to claim the weapons, I assume what happens at the end is destruction destroys the island.
Do you think it was destruction? I think it was probably just they bulldozed into a thing that wasn't good.
I mean, it could be that. It could also have just the other thing I was thinking about is that it maybe just disappeared because destruction and delirium left.
Left? Yeah, because yeah, Delirium does say, well, it's here because we're both here and we do things when we're in close proximity to each other. And I mean, that's another good thing for the story. I do appreciate the relationship between Destruction and Delirium. He obviously cares for his younger sister and wants to make sure that she's recuperating from whatever happened to her.
Yeah, which she stays with him in actual Sandman too, right?
Yeah, they do have a close relationship in Sandman proper as well. Yeah.
I'm interested that you don't really. Well, I guess maybe not like destruction is strong, but like I don't know. I was always taken with the like, especially for these people who are like the personification of concepts to
Yeah.
not want to be the concept anymore. But he's also not. He's like stuck in an in between phase, right? Because like delight becomes delirium, and we kind of even see parts of that in this. And
Yes.
destruction just like is destruction still, but also
Yeah.
isn't destruction. Like he hasn't changed yet. So I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe I should reread the story now and give him a second chance, but
I mean,
there
you're
were
right in that there's not a ton of story, but
yeah. I, it was just something. It was a story that I could have or not. I just didn't care. It was okay. It's all right. It was
yeah,
there.
I think that's
It
fair.
felt like Gaiman needed to fill out the book basically, and he didn't have like it wasn't some like crazy artistic expression like Delirium and Despairs was. It was just a story
Well,
that
in the
was illustrated
introduction,
fine.
like
Yeah,
in the introduction, he talks about I think how this one was basically a concept he lifted from. Oh darn, I can't remember the writer's name off the top of my head. I'll put it in the show notes.
sure.
Like a writer that he liked who had died recently, I believe.
Hmm.
Like it was a story concept that person had, and then he basically lifted it and then used it to do this destruction story. And like it kind of feels like that in that it's I don't know, it's like you said, it's a perfectly fine short story, but at this end of the day, like it's not the best story in the volume for sure.
Yeah, no, you could definitely tell it wasn't a Gaiman original. Didn't have that flair that he usually throws in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's number 7 in my power ranking.
Okay.
Next one is Despair, of course.
Okay. We have that listed at the same spot.
Good. And that Despair one is called Portraits of Despair, I believe.
Oh wait, no, I had Despair last still, even though I couldn't finish Delirium.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, it's called Portrait. I think it might be 15 Portraits of Despair because originally it was going to be 25 according to the introduction.
Yes, it is 15 Portraits of Despair, and it is what it says it is.
But it's not a comic book. It's not a comic book.
Well, how would you define a comic book?
I was thinking about this actually because there have been a lot of people who have done this. I think for it to be a comic book, I'm not going to try to actually define it, but I think in order for
Okay.
in order for something to qualify as a comic book,
Sure.
the words and the pictures have to act as a storytelling unit. Like one has to be in service of the other and they have to go together and work jointly to push the story forward. And it also has to progress through time in a way that makes at least some amount of sense. I would argue the words and pictures here, you could divorce them of each other and they would be completely fine. Like they don't really, except for like maybe a couple of them, like add to each other. Like 3 kind of does. Like some of them do, but they're not. I don't know. But the other thing is like them being static short story images. Like there's no progression of time on the page.
Sure.
Like especially number 9.
I mean, yeah.
So
I mean, it's more like a poem than it is a story.
I will give you this. It is more of a comic book than the issue of Batman that Grant Morrison did, where he did an entire prose story about the Joker becoming the Clown at Midnight.
All right.
That was like 22 pages of a prose story with some digital illustrations, and this is more of a comic book than that was.
Good for Morrison. Good for them.
Oh, that one's unreadable too, Pat.
Hey man, you gotta take those shots. Prove that you're an artiste. Yeah, I don't know. I agree that it probably missed its mark, at least with us. I'm sure some other people probably certain stories would hit them differently. And
oh yeah, I mean,
certainly reading this in the year of our Lord 2020 has made it hit a little differently than it did when I read it back in college.
Yeah, there's that. That actually for me was part of the reason I maybe latched onto the destruction one, is the start of that story where she's like, I just keep thinking about the world ending.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, I mean, I appreciate it for its surreal art, and some of the stories are certainly, I mean, they're not fun, right? They're not enjoyable, but they're not meant to be.
Now we're in our sub podcast within a
You
podcast.
want to rank the 15 Portraits of Despair?
No, I don't actually want to rank them. But which one was your, if not favorite? Like, which one did you have the strongest feelings about?
Strongest feelings. I mean,
well, favorite's a tough word for this set of stories, right?
Right.
If you need to think about it, I can tell you that mine is the one with the cats, number 4.
The cats one sticks with you.
It really does, right?
Like the fact that they had to dig through all the corpses of the cats.
Like that one could be a comic in and of itself, honestly.
Though I think the snippets of the illustrated, I think does a good job of portraying just the absolute horrid nature of it. Yeah, I think it's probably that one. But yeah, this one definitely hits different in 2020 than it did back in 2016.
I appreciated in 7 the overlay of desire on top of despair.
Well, it makes sense thematically for them to be twins, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Despair. And yeah, reading this is especially that one. I was like, oh yeah, they're twins.
I actually didn't remember they're twins, but the thematic connection totally makes sense of you wouldn't despair unless there was something you wanted, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think that's another thing that some of these brought up is the fact that despair exists so that you can have without despair there isn't hope, right? You need to have darkness to have light. So she serves a purpose.
Yeah, this is a discussion I've been having since we talked about Brave New World in AP English Lit.
Oh yeah?
Did you do that one?
I read it. I don't remember that specific discussion.
We definitely had the discussion because in that book, they're all kind of on drugs that keep them happy all the time, right? And
Soma,
it's yeah. So it's like, are they actually happy? Because they're just chemically induced happy, and is that fine? Maybe it's fine. I don't know.
Yeah.
I might have more evolved thoughts about that now than I did then. Because I was definitely in the...
That's the book that has the character Mustafa Mond, right? I just love that name, Mustafa
Ooh,
Mond.
maybe? He typed it into Google.
Mustafa. I think he was like the boss,
Yes, he
the
is the most
manager.
powerful and intelligent proponent of the world state, according to Spark Notes.
Mustafa Mond.
But yeah, but that one plays with the "can you be happy if you're not sad" sort of thing. Like, and I don't know. I think you could be happy without being sad. I wouldn't mind trying it.
Well, certainly wouldn't appreciate it as much, right? If you didn't know that there was an opposite.
Yeah,
If you didn't know of any other state to be than happy, then are you truly happy?
I would argue yes, but maybe not as happy as someone who's happy after having experienced despair. But then at the
Because
same
then,
time,
then
like,
would you like start like gradiating happiness then if you're always happy? Like, oh, you're.
Pat, are you asking me if I empower rank happiness? Because I
This is what
can.
I'm saying.
I can
Like,
do it.
we're going off on a tangent of a tangent.
Oh, please, Pat. If this specific portion of this comic is not made for going up your own ass, then I don't know what is.
Man, I love this comic. It's so good. But yeah, Despair, it's an interesting read, quote unquote.
I mean, it definitely is a read.
Yeah. Well, viewing, anyways, and experiencing.
Now, do you want to do the quiz from number 13? Live on the air. If you were God, what would you abolish, Pat?
I don't know, man. It's rough.
Like I said, there's definitely stuff in here. Like the fact that I stopped on this page and I thought about it for a good 10 minutes probably, like means there's something there. I still don't like the story.
It's not even a story, though. It's like.
It's a bunch of stories. Some of them are stories and some of them are like statements, I
I
guess.
think more than any other story in this collection, this is supposed to evoke it's endless, right? It's
Yes, this is you experiencing despair because you just want the story to be over.
not quite what I was going for, but
No,
sure.
it is. I'm
If that's
sure
what
it
it
was.
was.
I'm sure that's what you were saying.
If that's what got you there, Matt, then it's fine. It's fine. I don't know. In that way, it's sort of powerful,
No, it definitely is.
and for that reason, it was not my last. Because while the destruction story is okay, it was forgettable. Like this despair story makes an impact.
That's true. Before the end of the podcast, you're going to tell me what you would abolish if you were God. Think about
What
it.
I would abolish?
Yeah.
Free will. It hasn't done any of us any good, I feel.
Wowzers. Went right for it.
What have we done with it, really, when it gets down to it?
Only everything.
Yeah, but we're so willing to give it away, Matt.
Oh, Pat. Don't fall into despair. Let's move on to the next story.
What? Like I say, if we were talking about this in 2016, I'd have different answers.
It is a much different comic to read in many respects from reading it now versus when we initially read it in college, that's for sure.
It's like the United States is that trailer. And we're all those
We're
kids.
all the cats.
And our owner just left to go get a job because they didn't have any money.
Pat, you got to pull up what's the next story.
Oh, God. Okay. The next one is Destiny. And right here in my notes, I have 2 words. Frank Quitely.
Yeah, I agree with that. We're actually tracking pretty closely as far as
Really?
the power ranking. Yeah. So like I had Despair, then Delirium, then Destiny.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Frank Quitely rocks, and his illustrations are always top notch. This one is more loose. Like he obviously doesn't need to worry about backgrounds, which probably he appreciated.
Yeah.
And probably made the comic go a little faster because getting Frank Quitely to churn out stuff is always.
So apparently, actually, according to a thing I read that I am sure I favor stuff and I'll find to put in the show notes, this was originally going to be drawn by Mobius, who was like a really famous French artist who's done a bunch of stuff. Like one of the things that pops to mind for me, well, one of the things I read recently, actually, because we got it from the library, was Adina, I guess it would be called, Edina. And that was cool. I think that's just him. But then he also did a really cool Silver Surfer story with Stan Lee, of all people.
Whoa.
And like his style and Quitely's style are kind of similar, but I believe what happened is Mobius actually passed away before the book was ready.
Oh.
So then they pulled Quietly in to do this. And the reason it was all like single page images was to give Mobius an easier time of it.
Oh, okay. I mean, it works.
Oh yeah. Like one of the things with this one to me is that is also like barely a comic story. It is a comic story though, because like time progresses a bit on the page and like it's a linear story.
I mean, it's
But
more just like a description of who and what Destiny is.
yeah. But it's pretty as heck, that's for sure.
Gorgeous.
Not wrong about that. I was actually surprised you had this one so low.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I would have thought this would be like
I'm a quite the fan.
top few for you.
As you point out, it isn't much of a story. That's
Yeah.
probably why it's as low as it is. It's beautiful. It's fun. But it's basically, if you were to have all the words on one page, it would probably be a paragraph or two.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind that because I think we talked about this, like Gaiman being a person who, at the very least, thinks about comics and how they're structured and how pages are laid out. Like, I think understands when to just get the heck out of the way.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So I actually kind of appreciate the simplicity of it that way.
Well, it certainly didn't need more than what it is, right?
Yeah. So here's a question I have for you, because one of the things I was thinking about, and we talked about a little bit already, was I would not give this to someone as their first Sandman book. Like, I just wouldn't, because I don't think it makes enough sense.
Okay.
But I think one of the ways you could fix it is by putting this story at the front.
Oh, because it describes who the Endless are?
Yeah, like it introduces you to like the concept of these like literally larger than life beings that represent these concepts. Like it introduces all 7 of the Endless. There's that second page where Quietly has drawn all of them.
Yep.
Like it even talks about you will spend time in the realm of each of his siblings. You will dream, despair, desire, destroy, delight, and otherwise, and eventually die. And it's like, how cool would it be if you read this story first and then as you went through the book, you did all of those things? Like that would be so cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd be fine with that. Instead of having it last be first. I think they went, no, that's not even true. I was going to say they went in order of age of the Endless, but that's not true at all. Because Death, I think, is the second oldest.
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
And then Dream.
Yeah, I wonder, they might actually be in age order on that page where they're all standing there, right?
Yeah, that would make sense. Yes, Dream, Destruction, Despair, Desire, Delirium.
But like this to me sets up the concept of them so well that they could then just pop into each of their stories where they like, for the stories being named, or like the chapters being named for them, because the stories all have names too, but like for the stories being named for them, the Endless are barely in a lot of these stories, as we pointed out with Destruction, and as we'll touch on when we get to the Death one for sure.
Yeah, true. It would help new readers more if this were in the beginning than the end. But would you agree that for us, people who have read it, it makes more sense to be in the end than the beginning?
Yeah, I think so, actually. Like, and I think it's a cool one to end on also. Like, that last image of Destiny walking through that gateway is a really cool place to end
And I
a
love
book.
like the steps that he's walking down are so worn because he's been tracing his steps around his garden for so many
Yeah.
times.
And also, like, it's kind of fading out too as you go towards the bottom of the page. So, yes, you're right, but also I think I'm right.
Well, okay. To continue on this, what would you put as the last one then, if not Destiny?
Oh, I would have to think about that. I didn't actually answer that question.
Because I don't know if there's another one as an end piece. Though here again, obviously Destiny Story was designed to be an end piece, so it's hard to swap them around.
Yeah, but I think like you could actually seamlessly swap the Destiny one to the front, and it would actually.
I agree, but like none of the other
ones. As far as what you
are
put at the end, yeah, I think it would be
enough to be an
the
ending.
Death one.
Yeah, I could maybe see that one
because that's also an ending.
Yeah.
Final. Yeah.
There you go. If you listen to this, Mr. Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, no, DC Comics in the next collection, just swap them. Just put this one at the front.
See if anyone notices. Great. All right. On to the next?
Yeah.
Okay. My next one I have, and I wasn't sure about this one in my third one, but I have at number 4, Desire.
Really? Okay. You ready for this?
Yeah,
Desire is my favorite story of the book.
I had a feeling it might be. It was a toss up between this and the next one for me for 3 or 4. It's it's beautiful and the story is fun. Just I think I enjoyed the others more than this one.
Yeah, I could see that. Like, I kind of figured when I had ranked it first, I was like, I don't think Pat will rank this first.
It is a very well illustrated story though. And that the protagonist, she is pretty badass.
Yeah, and I think I enjoyed that. Like, I think this protagonist of like the many side protagonists we get, because so many of
Mm-hmm.
the stories are not actually about the endless that they're
Yeah, Desire is
supposed to be
barely in
about.
this, other than the fact that it's all about desire.
I was
But
gonna say, but Desire's super in this.
Desire themselves are only in it for like what, a panel or a page or
A
two.
page? I think it's one page actually.
Like it's a front and back of
It's
one
2
page.
pages. Yeah, you're right.
But yeah, the whole thing is obviously about the power of desire because the protagonist wields it like a sword, basically, come the end of
Yeah.
the story.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I think because like this protagonist, I think I enjoyed the most of all the side protagonists. And I think part of the reason I enjoyed her story the most is because I was just listening to, or was I? Oh no, it was in this book. It's in this book, right? Where
Yeah,
Desire's like, hey, all stories, they're just about someone wanting something, and either they get it or they don't.
it's
Right?
true.
So like
Mm-hmm.
this person is the person who wants their thing the most in the entire book, I think. So I guess just like that intensity of feeling carried through, and that's why I really like this one.
I don't know. Yes, I would agree that. I mean, this protagonist in the Desire story, which is called something.
What I've tasted of desire.
There it is.
But yeah, and like the actual illustrations are great. Like all the reds and oranges throughout this, like
Milo Manara is the artist, and
yeah. And I know that like I don't actually know a ton of stuff that Milo Manara has done, but I remember specifically some like X-Men swimsuit covers or something like that
oh
that were
sure,
like being passed around and people were like, I'm not sure about these, but like this book to me, outside of maybe the scene where that witch eats a sausage, never feels
it's
gratuitous.
gratuitous. Like yeah, that is definitely like I need a sausage. I need to eat it provocatively in
But
front
you
of
know
you.
what? Like also it like it's a sexy sex story, like whatever. Just like
Yep. No, you see lots of tits and ass in this one. That's true. And other than that sausage, you don't see any dicks though. So that's a strange choice.
yeah, where are the dicks in this story? There's men who wrestle naked in this story. There could have been dicks in this story.
I'm guessing DC said, okay, let's just we're calling it at the dicks.
You know what? DC has shown Batman's dick in a comic book,
No,
so they
that's
have
true.
no
They
legs to
have.
stand on at this
I've
point.
forgotten. Oh my god, that's funny.
If they can show the literal children's hero Batman's dick in a comic book, they can put dick in this comic book.
No, it's a good story, and I can definitely see why it would be your favorite. I guess it's because I don't. I guess it's because I lose the protagonist towards the end, like that final panel when they show her aging, and the fact that her one desire is still all that she really cared about. She did remarry, she did have children, but it's still the one thing that has defined her wants is that relationship.
See, and this is where I'm gonna show my married guy privilege maybe a little bit, but like
Perhaps this goes back to like Titanic and goddamn Rose and that stupid gem. You married, you had a husband, you had kids, but oh, that Jack on the goddamn Titanic, you had to go back for him.
I mean, this is a conversation we had when we were talking about Battlestar Galactica too, right? Whereas like I think there were some of the scenes that hit for Mike and I in a way they didn't hit for you, and like that last page of this comic hit a lot for me because it's something I've actually thought about a lot is like how am I going to feel if that day happens where the person that I love the most in my life is no longer here? Like,
Sure.
am I just going to like,
Can you move on?
well,
And
like
will
what
it mean
happens
as
to that
much?
fire, right? Like, does it just sit there? Like, never to be actually lit again, but like also to not, I don't know. It's a weird thing to think about. And I thought about it in this one.
You've tasted more desire than I, Matt. So you
I don't want to say that. But I do wonder if that's part of the reason they hit in different like, it hits in different spots for us potentially.
I mean, absolutely, that could be the case. Also, that dude was just a dick, so I mean, I don't know why she was so fixated on him.
I mean, there is that. It does have some of the, like, very childish, like, "Oh, he said he doesn't like her, so he obviously likes her." It's like, that's not always how it works, but okay.
Right? And like she admits that he was having sex with other women all the time, but all of a sudden, like, yeah, I don't know. It is what it is. It was what it was. It's a beautiful story, beautifully illustrated. It is my number 4. It is your number 1, and I understand both.
It's one that we should probably, if we ever revisit stories in the future, have one of our female co-hosts revisit it with us.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Because it would be interesting to get a not you and me
A
perspective
male.
on that one.
I mean, it's a story written, illustrated by men too. So yeah, it would be interesting
Yeah,
to
about
see
female desire.
what they feel about. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
And dudes wrestling naked in a hall.
Hey man, how else are you gonna show that you're worthy
But
of
no
of,
dicks.
of a woman whose husband's head you just planted on a table and she seems strangely okay with?
That's the thing that did get me about this story and some of the other stories is, like, these people in the stories who are not the endless, like, weaponizing emotions in this way.
Hmm.
And not really knowing how they're doing it, so we don't really get explanations about how they're doing it. Like, that's the thing for me that made me have the feeling you've been feeling about the other stories we've talked about on this podcast, where it's like, "Where's the explanation? Give me the give me the how this is happening."
Well, I mean, Desire in this one says that she will always be theirs, right?
Yeah.
So like this particular person has like incredibly strong connection with Desire.
It's also a thing in Sandman where certain people are, like, more connected with certain endless in certain realms, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Because that's part of what I was when I was doing my research, that popped up, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I do kinda remember that."
Yeah. Yeah. So my third one, which I wasn't sure should be 4 or 3, is the Death one, which is like Death in Paris or Venice, right?
Venice, yeah. Yeah, I had that around 3 or 4 actually too. To me, that one felt
Death
very
and
similar.
Venice. Yeah.
Oh, makes more sense, I guess, because I think
Yeah.
there is a thing called Death in Venice, so
Yeah.
duh. That to me felt the same way you felt about the Destruction one,
Yeah.
except the art is better.
It is better. And honestly, I would probably maybe like it more if they didn't spend so much time with Sergei. I don't understand Sergei. It's a strange lens to view this story through.
Yeah, so part of the reason I think there are a couple things that, like, didn't work for me, and that
Mhm,
even though it's a good story, and I think the art is probably 3rd or 4th best art in the book,
mhm.
like, it just didn't connect for me, and I think part of it is the disconnect between the 2 stories, like, I don't really get how they matched up or influenced each other that much. I don't know if you felt differently about that.
I mean, there really isn't any connection with the fact that he finds the island and opens the door for death, which I think is probably a commentary on the fact that he's in the army and the fact that he's opening the door for death by killing people in war, introducing death to people.
That could be it. Yeah, because I mean, he's definitely another one of those people who, like, the woman in Desire is, like, connected to the person or the realm
Right. And
of the
he's
endless
like
that we're reading about.
deals death in war. But like I think his story is much too elongated. Like they could have told that much more simply than going through. But I guess in that you need to have the time jump, right? You need to have him encounter death when he's a young boy, and now when he's a man to illustrate that death has been waiting at this door.
For a long
So
time, yeah.
yeah, so I don't know, but I do think the weakest part of the story is Sergei in his bits.
I agree, and also, don't use cursive fonts in comic books.
That did bother me a
Just
little
don't do it.
bit.
There was
It's
some
like,
cursive in Overture when I was rereading it tonight too, and I was like, "No, no, stop."
do they even teach kids cursive anymore? My God,
They don't think they do,
no,
actually.
no.
I wouldn't know, though. To ask some parents.
But
But
yeah, the best part of it is definitely the Count in his way of how he spends his perfect days.
yeah, dying and then punishing himself, and
With
then
debauchery. Yeah. I think my favorite scene is probably when Death sweeps through the island, though, and like points to people and tells them exactly how they actually died.
it's really good, right? It has that thing before it too, where Sergei's story like stretches into the gutter at the bottom of the right page, and then he like enters the other story from the top of the left page, and it's like an unbroken panel. That's a good bit
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because the rest of the story has like very clear delineations. Although I have to say, like jumping back and forth between timelines was rough, but I think that might have also been a thing that was reading it digitally because I
In what way was it rough for you?
so like flipping the page, you get one page of like Sergei's world, and then you get one page of the Count's world. Whereas I pulled it up on the computer here tonight, and I got it on like the 2-page setting, so it would actually be like you get it in a book, and you
Mm-hmm.
get 2 pages of a world at each page turn versus 1 page of a world at each page turn. And so you're like kind of immersed in the world a little bit more. So I
Sure. I mean, yeah. Other than like the flashback to when Sergei's a young boy, it's one 2-page spread for each of the. It's one perfect day for the Count, and then Sergei talking
Sergei
about
wandering
his.
around, yeah. And I think
Yeah.
like losing that extra page of like color and the just the stuff happening on the right side of the page kind of threw
Hmm.
me off a little bit because I when I read it on here I was like, "Oh, this actually reads better to me." Like I wonder if I had read it on the computer instead of on the Chromebook if it would just rank higher than the destruction story for me maybe.
Hmm.
Maybe. I don't know.
Could be. But yeah, I mean, and I think that the fact that I know that there are better death short stories in this one makes it
Yeah, it doesn't
a
help
little
it, right?
like I keep remembering the high cost of living is really good. That's another side story that Gaiman did.
That's another one that I've read and I couldn't tell you what happened in it because that happened to me with this too, where I was like, I know I've read this. I don't remember any of these stories.
Yeah, like one of my recommendations, I think, is the collected death short stories. Because they're certainly good ones.
Yeah, I remember those being good. Those are ones that Mike bought, so I read them and I hadn't actually read them before that.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, my number 2 is Delirium, of course. Can't be number 1.
How dare you?
I can't go that high.
We have them in the exact. We have that one in the exact opposite spot.
So you got it 6.
Yeah,
Nice. I don't know. I really enjoyed it. And here again, it's because I have that structure of knowing who Daniel, Barnabas, and Matthew are and what's going on and why they're doing what they're doing, which I don't know if a new reader would
I'm not even a
glean.
new reader, and I did not understand what that dog in the window was until we got to like
Oh,
the
really?
10th page of that story. I was like, what is this dog doing?
It's Destruction's dog, Barnabas.
I did figure that out when he was called Barnabas. I was like, oh, I get it. I know who that dog is now.
I mean, the idea of the personification of delirium needing assistance and other people not being able to go near her because they would suffer like psychotic breaks. Who do you go to help her? Obviously, people who are already broken.
Already broken. It is a
And,
good, like, it's a good conceit. And like, it is, like, even without being able to read it, I understood the story.
and I just like the 5 rescuers too, and the fact that each of them demonstrated different psychoses, I guess.
See, I didn't
Different.
have anything for the rescuers except for the first girl, honestly. Like
Oh, really?
maybe the second guy, the homeless guy.
What do you mean you didn't have a connection to or feelings towards?
Yeah, like I think that's part of the reason all of these stories aren't, or a good number of these stories aren't quite what I wanted.
Hmm.
Is that instead of getting actual stories, they're doing the thing that like Columbo does, or like certain episodes of Batman the Animated Series do, where instead of getting a Columbo story or a Batman story, you're actually getting a story about other characters and Columbo's there, or like and
Sure.
Batman's there. And that's what most of these stories are doing. And I think a lot of their success hinges on whether you actually connect with those side protagonists. And I didn't really hear, again, except for the first girl.
Well, I mean, that's probably because
They're
Sandman.
crazy. Like, yeah, how am I supposed to connect with this lady who thinks that she's having lizard babies?
Sure, but I mean, I don't know. I appreciated that all of them had like such Most of them, other than the guy who took illicit drugs and opened his third, fourth, and fifth eye and couldn't close them again. Like the young girl, obviously had some sort of sexual assault, and her mental state is crumbled as a result of it. She's escaped into herself. And then the man who sees paranoid messages from dead birds from I don't know if it's the government or if they actually say who the messages are coming from.
I don't know if he knows who the messages come from, now that I'm looking at it. I think they just come.
And he knows them to be true, then he's paranoid about who sent the message. But yeah, and then the woman who thinks she has lizards in her, I got the feeling that she like lost her children in like childbirth or something like that, or like her kids died and she suffered a mental break afterwards. That's the feeling that I got from her.
That could be possible.
But like the absolute bizarre, surreal nature of this comic is amazing. Like
The thing is, like, I really like this artist too.
it's
Like,
so much fun.
I just don't like this story. But I do think so I was talking to you about how that double page spread where they actually go in to rescue Delirium
Yep.
is, like, literally unreadable on my Chromebook because there are certain things that, like, digital comics readers can't do when they're small, and they can't do that. They can't do that double page spread. Like, the
This is the one
comics
with the giant shark with
yeah,
green and
where
blue
Delirium
eyes.
is a shark,
Yeah.
I think.
Yep.
Yeah, it doesn't like, you can't read it. Literally unreadable on my Chromebook. I
That's a
tried
shame.
3 times.
I mean, what do you do when Delirium escapes inside herself? You gotta send someone in. Crack team. Literally crack team.
Oh, see, I thought it was because 'cause they're on crack.
One of them may have been.
But yeah, so this one might also be on me because I might not have I might have not had the right reading device to read it on. I didn't even understand that Delirium was on the side of that double page spread reaching down until an hour ago when we started recording.
Well, I think there's also fun in the fact that, yeah, like there is certain details that you can easily miss because the absolute color like explosion that you see on every page. But that's sort of fun. Like in a reread, like you say, you catch details that you didn't catch before.
Yeah, I think I texted you, like, the second time I tried to get through it, I was like, "I still haven't actually read it all the way through, but I understand what happens in the story because it is a comic book story, unlike
It
the
is.
Despair one. So you can just look at it and kinda tell what's happening.
Oh, I like this one.
That's fair. The fact that we disagree is why we have a podcast.
Indeed. Indeed. It would be boring if you had the same list.
How did you feel about the ending of this one?
I liked it. The young girl going back home to her mother. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Did you not like the fact that she's still broken?
Oh, no, she's not broken? I don't know, like, it's a little like, it's tidy in a way that stories are tidy, but I feel like could potentially downplay the trauma that was on display in that weird page where the guy's wearing a fish mask and on top of her.
Well, I mean, I think the act of taking she did something, right? She went beyond her. She hasn't left her house since the attack, right? That's her introduction is her mother taking care of her every day and going back to her room and this is her life and then somewhere in the back of her head she's screaming. Like she went out. She did this adventure. She rescued a girl who needed help who was in a similar state that she was. And in that way, I think she's on her way to more stability.
Yeah, and I think reading it like that is good. I feel like there's a other interpretation of it that makes it tidier than that and is bad. And maybe this is another one where if we revisit a book, it might be this one actually, because I feel like there are multiple stories where it'd be good to get a perspective that's not just you and me. Because I thought about whether
Hmm.
that ending is too tidy or not, and I'm not sure where I land on it, to be honest with you.
I mean, I'm not a big fan of things that tie off messy situations and bows. We've talked about the ending of Brotherhood before, of Full Metal Alchemist,
Yeah.
and I feel like they it tied everything off too neatly for me. But I think this one is open to interpretation enough that I didn't mind so much.
All right.
But yeah. Number one, the only one that's left for me is the Dream Story.
Yeah, I had that at number 2, so we're close.
So your number one was again.
Desire.
Desire. Okay.
Yeah, like, I think that one is beautifully illustrated. Of the side protagonists, I think that's the protagonist I connected the most with a lot because she knew what she wanted throughout that story, and, like, I don't know, that world was just
She
so
felt
consistent, it made
cold to
sense.
me. I don't know. I didn't
Really?
have. Yeah,
Hmm.
like she was so fixated on what she wanted. I don't know.
I mean, she,
It,
like, felt on fire in a very like, I get why you're saying cold because I think she's so, like, focused on the thing she wants that it could seem like she's
she
not
seems.
I
I don't
keep
know.
on going to ruthless, and ruthless is not the right word, I'm trying to figure out, hang on.
She
But, like,
she's almost sociopathic in like
detached, I
her.
guess? Yeah, detached is probably the right word then. Like, I
Yeah,
get what you're saying, like, she kinda feels detached, but at the same time, I feel like that to me proves how much she's on fire.
and we don't actually see her like mourn his death at all, right? So in that way, it sort of lost me.
I mean, that last page is
Sure, but
basically
there again,
what
I
you
don't
see
know.
of it, yeah.
She's saying that she won't have anything greater than what it was, but there again, I didn't really feel any remorse in the fact that I don't know. I don't know. I didn't feel the same way, which is fine, as we say.
No, that's fair. And I think for me, also, the art in that one is probably, if not the best art in the book, at least top
This
3.
one, The Heart of a Star, the Dream one, is the best art.
This one's very good. Like, this one's also top 3 for me. I think it's between there are 4 of them that I juggle, actually, because I do actually really like the art in the Death one.
Sure.
I really like the art in the Quietly one, but I think it being just, like, basically all splash pages kinda
Yeah,
hurts it in the ranking.
sure.
And then I really enjoy the Dream one, and I really enjoy the art in the Desire one too. So,
The
like,
Dream one's so good.
the Dream one's really good.
It's so good. It's the most. It's the most comic booky story, right? It's the most. I don't know.
I mean, it's an actual issue of Sandman, whereas the other ones are not.
Right. And it's the only issue that includes all the other endless in it.
Yeah.
That's not true. Destiny. But they actually do things in this
Sure.
one.
Yeah, they're actually not in that one, they're just
True. They're just
statues.
reference. Yeah.
But, like, this could easily be Sandman number 36, right?
Oh yeah, they could have like an issue tossed into one of the earlier ones to explain why Dream and Desire hate each other so much. But like, it's just fun. It's a fun story. The premise is just the fact that there's anthropomorphic suns, galaxies, and dimensions walking around. The fact that the story itself is our sun's soul telling Earth like a bedtime story.
It's one of the most Grant Morrison, Neil Gaiman stories there's ever been.
It's so great. I love it. And the fact that you like run into characters, including young Soul, we get to see our son just like as
Just
a
goof
little
it
like
up.
a nerdy kid just trying to
"Oh, no,
not.
I spilled."
Oh. But then yeah, as you point out, there's DC references all over the place.
So this story is gonna confound me when I go to put this in playlists on YouTube because I have a playlist that's DC Comics, and it's, like,
Haha. Yes, you
it's
do.
supposed to just be the superhero stuff, and I was like, "Oh, this Sandman book won't go in that, it'll go in the non-superhero stuff." It literally has
There are no superheroes in this. They're just references, and
it has a
they're
literal
sons of
guardian of the universe in
superheroes.
it, Pat.
A proto guardian. Proto
It has
guardian.
the origin of Superman in it.
Yes, I got that this read. I didn't get it before this read,
Oh,
Matt. That's
really?
why I love this story so much. It's like, wait, where do I know the name Ralph
One of my
from? Why
favorite
is that?
bits.
Oh my god! Oh my god! He's talking to Desire or Disparage. He's talking about the beauty of a single member of a species outliving its others. It's like, oh no, poor Krypton.
Yeah, this book is the
Yes,
actual origin of Superman, so, I mean, it's a superhero story now.
it's where Rao got the idea to blow up Krypton. Look out! It's so good, man. It's so good.
How is Jor-El supposed to fight against a destiny that's been predetermined since the beginning of the cosmos? Poor Jor-El.
I mean, Despair is working really hard on Krypton. That's for sure. And the fact again that it's a prequel set so far back, it's fun to see these characters as they were. You see difference like
Death is
Death.
not fun.
You've never seen Death. She doesn't love you at this point. She's not loving. She just
You say you
is.
don't really exist at this point, so that maybe makes sense.
Oh, it's so good.
When you read this time, did you know you were in for some Green Lantern bullshit? Because I did not know until
Oh yeah, it's my favorite part. The fact the main character is a guardian or a proto guardian, and she's like slowly learning to use will to influence the light of Oa. Like I'm a big Green Lantern fan, and that is probably part of the reason that draws me to this story.
yeah, I was like, "Oh, that's kind of a riff on Green Lantern stuff, that's cool," and then it got to the part where it was like, police,
Oh
priest, protector,
yes,
scientist, and I was like, "Oh, it's exactly Green Lantern stuff." It
guardians.
is Green Lantern stuff.
And did you think about the fact that she's at this conference that's talking about galaxies like segregating themselves into like distinct
Yes, I
sections?
absolutely did.
That the Guardians got the idea
To
to.
get the sectors, yes. Which that one I did not get until this read. Like, I know I already knew about the Superman thing, and I know I must have had the, "Oh my god, it's a Guardian of the Universe" thing before, but the sectors one,
It's so good, Matt. I love this
it's
story.
fun.
It works on so many different levels. If you're a Sandman fan, you'd like the fact that you're seeing all the endless at different stages of their existence. If you're a DC fan, it's got everything for you. If you just like beautiful comics,
Yeah.
it's got art is just
It
amazing.
very much reminds me of, like, in the same way, I guess, that the Quietly one kinda reminded me of, like, a children's storybook, this one very much feels like a children's storybook to me, in, like, the painterly style of it and kind of the like, how clean everything is.
You might want to censor some of the things Desire says,
Well, I
but
mean,
yeah.
the style of it, Pat.
Sure. No, I agree.
Let's teach kids that they should fall in love with their own son. SUN.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. She's been like worshiping and studying the powers of her son.
Oh, did you pick up on the bit where they talk about, how all this was, like, laid down in a book that was sacred for, like, ages? And that's the Book of Oa?
Yes. Yep.
That one took
Yep.
me a couple reads on this one, actually.
Oh my god. It's so good. Gaiman was just chuckling to himself while he
There are a
wrote
lot
this
of
one.
good gags in this one. Like, even the, like, Dream's favorite sibling being Desire in this one at the beginning,
Desire.
you're
It's
like,
like,
"Oh, this is gonna be fun."
yeah, like, oh, that's not something happened. Oh my god. And the dispute of the dimension that can't be perceived, but is upset that it can't address the council. Oh. And then they've even got the fairy in the realms of
Yeah, I
fairy
noticed
in
that
here.
too. There's a lot to be said for the power of foreshadowing and, like, also prequelness, right? Where, like, you know what's coming beforehand, so you're just, like, waiting for the narrative to catch up. Like,
Mhm.
very strong in this one in a lot of cool ways. So here's another question that I had because Wikipedia made me think about it because I was reading the Wikipedia entries for these stories, and
Mhm.
it's talking about how Destiny asks Killala whether she loves Dream, and, like, he doesn't
Mhm.
know, and they're like, "Well, he must know, though, because 'cause he's got the book," and I was like, "Well, is that how the book works? The book doesn't record everything, right? Like, the book doesn't record people's emotional states, potentially, like, the book is a story, like, whenever he reads it, he's reading a
Yeah.
story, so, like, unless the book has
He
already
just
said."
knows what happens. He doesn't know, like, the thoughts or desires of people. That's not his domain.
Yeah, so it totally made sense to me, there was some sort of, like, I don't know if it was an argument on Wikipedia, but there was some sort of like, "This doesn't make sense," and it's like, "It makes perfect sense to me."
He is literally, yeah, writing or reading the book of existence. It doesn't have you don't get to understand the thoughts of the characters in a book.
Well, it's the same way that someone who potentially, like, doesn't is not as good at processing emotions would, like, ask you, like, maybe an inappropriate question, right? Like, it's that
Sure.
sort of thing where, like, he understands what's happening, but he doesn't really always understand why. And then he also sets some of that stuff to happen because he's the one who sets it off.
Right, because he is still bound by destiny himself.
Yeah.
And the fact that Oa, when they get discovered by Dream, is scared and she doesn't understand you're a star, but is like, but he's
Yeah,
Dream.
but, like, he's a
he's,
concept.
he's literally Dream.
And she's like, "Yeah, the king of dreams?" And he's like, "No, though."
No, no, no. You don't understand what's happening,
Which
right?
is a good explanation of their whole deal too, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I could see this one being
second? Although by the time it's second, you've kind of, like, messed around in the whole endless mythology enough that I think the other ones would feel weird, so I'm not
Yeah,
sure of the exact order, Pat. I just know Destiny should be first.
I just love like the powers and stuff. The fact that Dream is transporting them in a bubble with like a bed and like just a bubble floating through space,
So where does the conference happen?
just in the middle of
Well,
space.
but, like, the sun is a person,
Mizar, yeah.
so it can't just be happening in space, right? Like, it has to be happening in, like is it happening in Dream?
No, I think it's actually I think these are just the personifications. I don't think you need to like. I don't think physics works in this
This
in this
bit of the
story.
universe?
Yeah.
I think I was rationalizing it as it happening in Dream for, like, Kilala to be there and her son to be there and her son to be a person.
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep thinking SON for
SUN.
whatever reason.
Stoa.
Yeah. Still, oh, thank
Sorry,
you.
I'll refer to him by name.
His proper name. Um, no, because if it's in Dream, travel to it. I don't
I
know.
mean, they do
I
travel to
thought
it, they
that,
take a bubble.
but yeah, my point is, if it's in Dream, why would Dream need to travel
I
to
mean, he
it?
travels
Could
in
it
there
just
sometimes, right?
in Dream? Yeah, I guess it's true. I don't know. I always thought that it's just the suns and dimensions exist, but they can like personify themselves elsewhere. They're just the personifications of those entities in the same way that dream can exist while people are dreaming elsewhere. Death exists in a particular spot, but people are still dying other
Yeah, that makes
places.
sense.
Because I think all like they point out, all these entities are much larger than they appear, are much more than what they
Yeah,
seem.
which is why Kalala is, like, so confused throughout the thing, right? It's like, "Oh, you're a representative of blah, blah, blah." Like, "No, though. I'm
No, we're
I'm
literally.
Stoa."
Let me make out with you.
'Cause that's what you do.
God damn it, Guardians. Jeez.
I really appreciated getting to see Delight as Delight in this one.
Right? Just a little girl. Which really makes it sad that she went through such a thing that would turn her into
Oh, yeah, we
delirium.
didn't talk about what do you think happened in her story to, like
Breaker.
yeah, do you think it's just that old dream died? Because that's what I thought it might have been.
I don't. She's delirium throughout all of Sandman, isn't she?
Yeah, but in this one, like, that one specifically takes place after Dream has died and Daniel has become Dream,
Oh, you think she's having an episode because of?
because old Dream died
Yeah,
at the
I mean
end,
that would
yeah.
make sense. Yeah, because yeah, Daniel's in it. That would make sense.
Because it never really says in that way that that story doesn't really say anything. That's not
Yeah,
true. That was
I thought
harsh.
I thought you were talking about like originally how did
No,
Delight
that I
become Dream? I don't
don't
think he's ever fully
yeah.
explained what happened, which he shouldn't.
Yeah, that would be bad. Don't do
Yeah.
that. DC Comics, don't do that.
There's a fine line, but don't cross that line. But yeah, that is my favorite story. It's part of the reason why I love this volume so much as I do is that dream story. Yeah, there's so many offshoots now. It's crazy. I haven't read anything.
Yeah, like I said, I've read all of Overture at some point. It came out so erratically that I don't
Yeah,
know that I've read it all in quite a while, but the
sure.
couple issues I read today were good. It's got those great J.H. Williams 3 panels where, like, the action is happening inside the Corinthian's teeth, his eye teeth.
The Corinthian. Oh my god. So many good characters.
Yeah, and then, like I said, the most recent Sandman universe stuff I've heard is good, but I have not read any of it, so
It's not all written by Gaiman anymore, right? They've
I don't think any of the current or most recent stuff because I think some of it's still ongoing and some of it isn't, but I'm not sure. But I don't think any of the most recent stuff is written by him. It's kind of like overseen by him,
Oh, okay.
if I remember correctly. It's sort of like an imprint thing.
Sure. What would that be your recommendation then for people to
That was tough because, like, I think for this one specifically, it's so easy to just be like, go read Sandman, right?
I mean, that's the obvious. Like, if you like this and you haven't read Sandman,
But I also think if you're reading this, you hopefully have already read Sandman because I think otherwise there's
I'd
not
still
going to
in
be a
mind that you could read this before. So
I don't like I think because like you said the death story is like not even close to the best death story
no,
and like the despair story is rough honestly.
But it's such a
for
good
various reasons.
each of the endless, though, right? I mean, other than I would say deliriums, which is actually like an event that's happening during the course of Sandman.
I'm not sure the dream one is as good if you don't get to chuckle at it as much as we got to chuckle at it.
But there again, you just don't get to chuckle at the endless stuff. You would, if you were a comic book fan, you would catch all the DC stuff.
Yeah, but imagine giving this to a you from college who hadn't yet read the Sandman stuff and who also wasn't a superheroes guy. Like, you don't get to chuckle at
That's
either
not
of those
me
things.
anymore, man.
No, I'm just saying though, like imagine you did. Like
Sure.
you don't get any in jokes of that version of the story,
It's
right?
still a fun story. I mean, the concept, like I said, of anthropomorphized planets, dimensions, and stars having a conference in deep space. The fact that our sun is telling our planet a bedtime story, like it's still
It's
Gaiman.
still good, right? But I
Yeah,
don't think it's as good.
it's not as good, but that's why I think you should read it first, and then you should read it last.
I think I would just have you read it last, personally.
Hmm.
Which is why when I was thinking of recommendations, I was like, I don't really want to recommend more Sandman stuff because A, that's easy to find anyways. Google the Sandman, you'll find it.
Yeah,
And B, I think it's more useful to tell people who have likely or hopefully already read all the Sandman stuff, like other stuff they'd enjoy. So I was leaning away from Sandman Rex, but
okay.
I'm curious whether you were you leaning towards Sandman Rex?
I mean, just for like the death one, I would say pick up the I think it's just called Death. The deluxe edition is
Was
what
gonna
mine.
say, I know there were two of them, and one of them's called Death: The High Cost of Living. I don't
That
remember
is,
what the other one is.
yeah, that's in this one as well as the one that's in this one. Death in Venice is also
No, I hear you flipping through that book, that physical
here.
book.
The hardcover too. It's so
Oh,
fancy.
baby.
Yeah.
I do remember those being good, though I don't remember specifically what happens in them. And I think those are good recommendations also because even if you have read all the straight up things that say Sandman on them, maybe you haven't read the death stuff yet, and you should. Those are good.
Yeah, there are a collection of like smaller ones, but the big ones are, yeah, the high cost of living and the time of your life are the two larger death stories that are in here. And they're fun. I mean, they're gaming stories, but it's also Death, and Death is probably one of the better characters he's created from Sandman. So non-Sandman stuff, though I couldn't think of anything outside of Gaiman, which maybe is cheap.
I mean, that seems fine.
The Books of Magic. I've only read the original trade. They've gone and done a series, I guess, and I haven't read any of those, but the original Books of Magic is pretty fun. It's basically Harry Potter before Harry Potter, but with a DC spin.
It's Harry Potter, but what if John Constantine was there?
Yeah, what if John Constantine and a bunch of other like very minor magic DC
How dare
heroes?
you say that about Zatanna?
Okay, Zatanna, sure, Doctor Fate, sure, but there are a couple other ones in there that you're gonna have to squint at.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's fun, and it's got Gaiman's flair for the dramatic illustrations and stuff in it, and I would recommend. What about you? You said you were thinking about stuff that wasn't Sandman. You got any non-Gaiman?
Do you like pantheons, Pat?
I'm not opposed to them.
Do you like
Yes.
fantasy stories where
Yes.
people embody gods and or concepts?
My God. Yes. I'm with you.
Do you like clever British writers?
Yes, I do.
Do you like beautiful illustrations?
Yep.
You should read The Wicked and the Divine. Hey, you did. You already have.
And I agree that it is well worth the read.
I think it's very much an extension of Sandman, like in that it's at least informed by it. Like very
Yeah.
different, but at the same time, I don't think would exist if Sandman didn't exist.
Yeah, no, I agree. I hadn't thought about that before, but yeah, you can directly see how one leads to the other.
Yeah, and even like pops backward and forward in time and stuff to like show you how the story is developing because there's some specials that take like most of the story takes place in I think it starts in 2015 and then stretches from there.
Mhm.
But like then there are also like various specials that go back in time and have different illustrators and stuff.
Yeah,
So
no,
it's very much in the Sandman style, but also it's about pop idols that are gods, gods that are pop idols.
it is a good story. I got to read the last two volumes.
You should. They're good.
It was getting weird the last few volumes. Like, where is this going? Oh God.
Yes, but it's very sad. As a person who has not read it back to front, but has read it, like all of it, like I found the conclusion very satisfying. So I think you'll enjoy it.
It's always good when they can stick the landing.
Yeah. And the other one that I was thinking of, especially if you like some of the more experimental stuff in here, is My Favorite Thing is Monsters,
Hmm.
which, oh shoot, I forgot to put the author illustrator in my notes. Emil Ferris, but that one won a bunch of awards a while ago, and I picked it up from the library, and like it's very cool. Like it's all kind of done as though it looks like it's on notebook paper.
Oh, fun.
So like it looks like it's someone's like drawings in their notebook, but it's very noirish at the same time. Like I think if you enjoyed the delirium and despair stories in here, but you wish they were more coherent, you'll like My Favorite Thing is Monsters.
All right. All right. Did we say Kieran Gillen's the author of Wicked and Divine?
Yeah, that's Kieran Gillen, Jamie McKelvey, and then a bunch of other people, including guest artists on all those like historical specials.
Those are
One
good
of which I
records.
believe is like an Agatha Christie mystery.
Oh, really? I don't know if I
Yeah.
picked one. I got to reread all of them anyway. So
Yeah, it's on. I think I've told you this. It's on my list to reread because like I own half of it in print and half of it digitally because it like I
nice.
cut off in the middle of the move to California, so I have to decide which format I'm gonna own it in. I think that will do it for this month's discussion of Sandman Endless Nights. As always, if you want to get in touch with Pat or myself, you can find us on Twitter as @WattPodcast. You can also email us at waitingonthetrade@gmail.com and read more comics related goodness at mattreadscomics.com. I'm also going to ask people to potentially give the podcast a review on the podcast app of your choice if you would like to. This is a thing that we don't ask for very much typically because I forget, but reviews help people find the show and hopefully they'll get it associated with other comics podcasts instead of general books podcasts in the Apple Podcast app.
Do it. And also read Sandman.
I was going to say, Pat, it's your book. Is there anything else you want to say in closing?
No, just that. Just read Sandman. Read some Gaiman stuff because the man knows how to write and he does beautiful work.
Thank you to everyone who listened to the podcast in 2020. And we hope that as you're hearing this, you're having a better start to your 2021.
Oh, please. Please, please, please.